Hello, you're on the air.
Hello. Good morning.
Hi.
Mr. Cooper, I agree with you that Waco was a massacre and a tragedy, and that it probably was an experiment to see just how much we would tolerate in the way of violence against innocents. I wanted to ask you, though, is it true that a number of people around Bill Clinton have died recently, and that the three or four agents that were shot at Waco initially, that those men were, pardon me, that those men were actually had been bodyguards to Bill Clinton, and that some sources, a couple sources, have mentioned that up to 24 people around Clinton have died within the last 7 months. I want to ask you, what do you make of this? Is it true? And what do you make of the works of Dr. Beter, who said that there's a technology to develop lookalikes or doubles for world leaders, and that possibly the Clinton we have before us is not really the real Clinton we saw during the campaign?
Okay, I'll have to disconnect you, but you can hear your answer on the radio, okay? Thanks for your call. All right, Bill, your answer.
Yes, it's absolutely true that many people have died. We know a minimum of 16 people who have been very closely connected with Bill Clinton have died within the last, hasn't even been a year, as a matter of fact, been less than a year, under very suspicious circumstances. We know that one of the ATF agents who were killed on February the 28th was actually shot on one of the cattle cars while they were driving up to the Branch Davidian Church, and he was shot by another BATF person in the cattle cars, and they carried him out of the cattle car before any shooting with the Branch Davidians ever started, and he was laying on the ground dying. He eventually died. They never even brought an ambulance or even tried to get him to a hospital. The other three died on the assault on the church, and President Clinton himself, when he made a speech later to the Department of the Treasury, named these three as having been his bodyguards during his political campaign for presidency. So that admission comes directly from the lips of the president. We know aside from those three, there's at least 16 other people who have been closely connected with the president who have died under mysterious circumstances over the last 8 to 10 months. And from yesterday's revelation about the two state troopers whom he had used to set up sexual liaisons with women over the years and even after he's become president, and also the investigations into the drugs being flown in from Central and South America to a small airport in the state where Clinton was governor, at an airport called Mina. This is no surprise. It's just trying to get through the corruption in the government to get someone in a legitimate position to investigate this. Considering all the deaths, I don't think anybody's going to have the balls to do that anyway. So it's going to be up to those of us out here who essentially are not afraid to conduct the research and investigations and make this stuff public.
What about the replicas? What do you think?
Well, I think you can take Dr. Peter Beter's tapes and throw them in the nearest fireplace, and it'll help keep you warm in the wintertime.
All right.
I don't know who he was or what his agenda was, but he certainly was not truthful in most of the information that he's revealed on his tapes.
All right, let's take a call on line 2. Hello, you're on the air.
Hi there. I just had a question. I wanted to respond to the comment that most of the American public is listening to the news and taking things sort of like sheep. My question is, obviously you're an intelligent person, but why should I believe you? And isn't it the nature of a conspiracy that the truth would really never be known? How do I know that you're not part of the conspiracy, in fact? And why should I listen to you rather than someone else?
Okay, good question. Let's find out the answer. Thanks for your call.
Thank you.
All right, Bill, you've heard the question.
Well, number one, the first thing I tell anybody when I go on the air on my own radio show is that you have to stop believing everyone. In this day and age, when the deceptions in the world are being created so rapidly and so rampantly, in order to keep the public totally and completely confused, and in order to bring about this one world government, you're a fool if you believe anybody, including me. But any cursory examination will reveal the truth to anybody who wants to look for it. The problem is most people are lazy. Looking for the truth requires work. Work is something that people avoid like the plague, so they usually don't do it. And besides that, they've been trained all their life to accept the word of people in positions of authority and not question it. The fact that, in fact, most times, if you use your own common sense and your own brain, you don't have to have somebody else tell you anything. You will know what the truth is. For instance, what happened in Waco, if you really understood the law, and if you really understood the relations of the federal government to states, and if you understood that suicide is not a crime until it's committed, even where it is a crime, and that there is no crime in the federal law books called suicide, you would have known that the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearm was lying when they gave that first press conference. You would have known that they would have had no authority over that church in a suicide situation, whether it was planned or whether it had actually been carried out. It would have been a matter for local law enforcement agencies, and so on and so forth. I mean, that's the way it goes. But what I advise people to do is institute their own plan, and it can never stop because the deceptions never stop in this world. There's always somebody who wants something from someone else, and they use deception, manipulation, lies, and deceit to get it. So you must institute your own program of continuous research and an honest, real search for the truth, and you have to be able to accept the truth no matter who it hurts or helps, even if it hurts you. Because the truth is that once you begin the search for the truth, it's going to shatter a lot of the preconceived notions and beliefs and things that you've been taught all your life. If you set out to try to prove your own beliefs right, you will never arrive at the truth.
All right, KCSB FM 91.9 in Santa Barbara. My guest today, William Cooper, author of Behold the Pale Horse. This is Bruce Stephen Holmes, Timeless Voyager Radio. Let's take another call. This is line 3. Hello, you're on the air.
Hello. Good morning. I'm so happy to hear your speaker, William Cooper, again, because I've heard him speak before. I've read his book, that wonderful book, Behold the Pale Horse. That sent me to the Bible to find out what is he talking about. I found out that I have had a lot of misinformation from the Bible. So, if I might make a suggestion, I've been studying everything I could get my hands on since 1961, and I just recently got a publication, and it's called The Overview, a wonderful thing. It says, Searching for the Truth in the New Age. As I've been wrong so many times, it was so helpful to read this periodical, The Overview. And the chapter I'm reading now is a constitutional primer and analysis, and they go into our Constitution and how it was gradually changed. Now, I didn't mean to make this speech, but I do like to say that there are helpful signs, because there's another periodical I've subscribed to called The New American View. That tells so much about the background. So with that, if anybody wants the address, I'll give it to them later.
All right, let's get a little comment here. Thanks for your call.
All right.
All right.
Bye.
William, are you familiar with the Overview? This is the new newsletter.
No, I'm not, but I am familiar with the Constitution being changed over the years. In fact, they've actually taken out one entire amendment to the Constitution and substituted it with something else. When I was in high school, I was taught that the 13th Amendment was a prohibition against Americans accepting titles of nobility, and that was in the Constitution when I was in high school. There has been no amendment, there has been no constitutional convention, there's been no legislation removing that 13th Amendment and replacing it with anything else. Yet if you'll go to any modern version of the Constitution and read the 13th Amendment, you'll find that that has been completely altered and changed.
How so?
And you'll also notice that George Bush recently accepted knighthood from Queen Elizabeth.
So what is your suspicion here?
Well, my suspicion is that, well, I don't know why they would change that, except it's always been traditional for Americans to reject a monarchy in favor of republicanism. Our country is a republic. It is not a democracy. Democracy is only a code name for socialism. One man, one vote always results in the irresponsible mass of people voting themselves everything until the whole system collapses. And that's what happened to the Roman Empire, basically. And so for some reason, they're trying to take us back into acceptance of a ruler rather than rejection of that.
Timeless Voyager Radio is the show. My guest today is William Cooper. Behold the Pale Horse is the book, 500 pages of the most documented, suppressed information ever published in the history of the world. Let's take this next call. Hello, you're on the air.
Hello, good morning. I was listening with some interest to this whole show, and it seems that he's correct that the deceptions that we face on a day-to-day basis are getting more and more complex and harder to discern. And I've found that everybody with a particular agenda, whether it be vegetarians or Republicans or whoever, seems to use quite a creative, should I say, mixture of truth and mythology and outright lies to get their agenda across. And I'm just the practical effect of that is that we're deluged by mountains and mountains of not just truth but deception as well. And I'd like to ask William, how does one continually sift through those things? I mean, I have quite a great deal of intelligence, which I try to apply every day. I'm not one of the sheep that believes everything I'm told, but I find that even if I am a really decent judge of what the truth is, that even it gets confusing because there's so much of it. And he's correct in that it is work, but you know, I have other things in my life too that are more important than trying to find out the truth of everything. I have to, I have to survive and eat for a living and try to.
Mike, you have to depend on someone, don't you?
Well, I depend on myself pretty much as best I can.
But no man is you're saying no man is an island. We need some help, right?
Well, the thing is, I guess my question is to what's the practical effect of all of this? Is there any way that this can be changed? Is there any way that we can stop this? I mean, the world, I think, is going to continue to get more and more complex. Is there anything that there's several different people who try to, jam culture by substituting the truth for the propaganda or turning the propaganda in on itself. I've practiced it a little bit myself in confronting some of the the hypocrisies that I see in certain movements that I vehemently disagree with.
All right.
What can we do about all this?
All right, let's let Bill address that. Thanks for your call.
No problem.
All right, William, your address to that.
Yeah, he's absolutely correct, and that the deceptions are getting more complicated and more numerous as time goes by, and the effect of that on the general population is that they quit looking for the truth, and that's exactly what these things are designed to do. And it's also designed to prepare them mentally for what's coming and to accept it. Now, I disagree with him that there's something more important than finding the truth. If you really believe that...
In other words, he was saying that he had to have a job, etc., and you are saying that...
Well, I'm saying that I'm no different than he is.
Mm-hmm.
And if I can find the time to do the research and discover what's really happening, then he also has the time. Many people use this as an excuse, and that's just unacceptable to me. See, this country was based on the fact that the people would be the watchdogs of the government, that each man and woman are kings and queens in their own right, and the government is our servant. Now, I can guarantee you that if you are wealthy enough to have servants and you turn your back on them and don't supervise them, that they're going to turn your household upside down and all the silver is going to disappear from the cabinet. Now, so we're in that situation now. We must be the watchdog of our government. We must know the truth. And I beg to differ from him. The world is no complicated today than it was 5,000 years ago. The only complication is when you have to learn huge amounts of knowledge in order to be able to deal with the manufacture, the creation of technology. As far as people and governments and all of that goes, there's nothing complicated about it whatsoever. But the deceptions tend to make people think that. They believe that the law is complicated, so rather than learning the law, they go hire a lawyer. When they hire a lawyer, they don't understand that they just made themselves, they just made a declaration of legal incompetence, and they become a ward of the court. They've hired a man who takes an oath to uphold the court and not the client, and he is, in fact, an officer of the court. So his first interest isn't even with his client to begin with, and that's just one simple example. I mean, I could go on and on and on and on and on, but if people don't wake up and help us search for and discover the truth and understand what the truth really is, they're going to find themselves a slave in a totalitarian, socialist world government that they never even dreamed was coming and won't even know that it's coming until it's here, and when that happens, it'll be too late. One of the ways that this is being brought about is through another deception. You see, they have to make people cry out for control and more control. And the control has to be over, independent sovereign nations and not just within a nation. And one of these is the ozone hoax. Number one, there is no ozone layer. Number two, there are no holes in the ozone. Anybody can figure this out if they just do a little bit of scientific investigation. It doesn't require much more than the level of knowledge of high school or the junior high school science. And one of the things that you'll find out is that ozone does not protect us from ultraviolet light. Ozone is a byproduct of a chemical reaction between ultraviolet light and molecules of oxygen. When ultraviolet light strikes molecules of oxygen in the first part of the atmosphere where oxygen molecules are concentrated in a dense enough layer where they interfere with ultraviolet light streaming toward the Earth, the ultraviolet light striking a molecule of oxygen causes the two atoms to split apart, forming, instead of O2, now you have two atoms called O. And these are free radicals. They will immediately attach themselves to anything that will accept them, including things that can be oxidized. So one of the byproducts of this is that some of these particles of O hit something else that can be oxidized readily, and it forms an oxide. Another byproduct is a particle of O will attach itself to another atom of, or molecule of oxygen, O2, and form O3, which is ozone. So the ozone layer is in no danger whatsoever as long as oxygen molecules exist in the atmosphere, and as long as ultraviolet light streams toward the Earth from the sun, there's always going to be ozone in the atmosphere. The only place that they ever show you that there are any so-called holes in the ozone layer are always over the poles, and always only over the pole that is experiencing winter at that particular time that the photograph is taken. And the reason for that is the Earth is tilted on its axis, and over the pole where there is winter at that particular time, no light is striking oxygen molecules in the atmosphere, and therefore no ozone is created. Whichever pole is undergoing winter at that particular time is experiencing 6 months of darkness. And all you sheeple out there who are buying all of these hoaxes and scams that make you call for control of the atmosphere, control of air conditioners, control of CFCs, you better wake up, because somebody is ramming it to you, and I mean they're ramming it to you with all they got, and you're just sitting there taking it. The truth is if there were going to be ozone holes in the atmosphere, the biggest ones would be over Los Angeles or London or New York City. How do all these CFCs get only to the poles, and only to the poles during winter to create these holes?
William Cooper is my guest. Let's take another call. Hello, you're on the air.
Yeah, I probably couldn't explain the ozone layer system for him, but as far as, this isn't really my question, but in response to what he says, I'm kind of against that whole theory, because the radiation that is dangerous to human beings is actually absorbed in the process of creating O3, which is ozone. Actually, my question revolves around more on your concept of the totalitarian regime we all exist under and one world government. I read somewhere that the Committee on Foreign Relations was like a group that had produced like the Secretary of State, the President, and the Vice President for the past 30 years, and that it's actually a cover group for international banking groups. That's my first question, if you could tell me more about that. And I guess that's it. You could just talk about that.
All right, thanks for your call. All right, William, you're on.
Yeah, well, number one, he's right. In the process of ultraviolet light striking oxygen and forming ozone, the harmful effects of the ultraviolet light are dissipated, and great numbers of people on the Earth are not contracting cancer from this. The increased rate of skin cancer from people going to beaches and laying in the sun is simply caused by more people going to beaches and laying in the sun. It wasn't too long ago when it was not cool to have a suntan, and that women wore these big hats and covered themselves with clothing so that the sun would never strike their skin. And in places where people have always been out in the sun, there's no more incidence of skin cancer than there ever has been. It's only where large populations of light-skinned people have migrated to tropical climates and have been exposing their skin to the sun in much greater quantities and for much longer times than they ever have in history. Number two, the Council on Foreign Relations is a subversive body in this country. They have published and made it no secret that their goal is to destroy the sovereignty of nations and bring about one world government. They literally, along with another group that they formed in 1972, called the Trilateral Commission, have been responsible for choosing all of the political candidates on a national basis that are presented for the people to elect. And it doesn't make any difference which one you vote for or which one actually gets elected. Both of them are always on the other side. And their goal, as I've stated, and they've published this many, many times, it is no secret, is to destroy the sovereignty of nations and bring about a one-world government. The international bankers, as you may believe, are not in control. Money, as you know, is a tool that can be used to bring things about. The international bankers are members of these organizations, and money is being used as a tool. But the international bankers are not in control, do not call the shots, and are not the brains behind all of this.
We have just a few more moments, and I'm very, very happy to have had you on the show today, William. Alternative 3, are you familiar with it? And what is it about? Is it a hoax? Is it true? What do you think?
Well, I don't know if it's a hoax or if it's true. We have the videotape of both segments of Alternative 3 that ran on British Anglia television available for people to study. Now, we know it's a docudrama, which means that it's all acted out. I've also read the book, and I also saw a reference to Alternative 3 in top secret documents when I was with the Office of Naval Intelligence in the United States Navy. We do know that there's a secret space program. We do know that there are anomalous structures on the moon and on Mars. It is entirely possible that we have been in space using this secret technology for many years, and if we are, could have actually built bases or colonies on the moon and possibly Mars. We could have built a space station in space somewhere. I don't know if all of this is true or not. We do know that someone has built something on the moon and on Mars unless NASA has furnished us with faked photographs.
For listeners, just to kind of review Alternative 3, my understanding of it is that it started with the disappearance of a large number of people, and later it was disclosed that these people were evidently either talked into or hijacked or abducted and taken into space programs and left, I guess, on these bases on Mars and Moon. Is that your understanding?
Yes, under a project called Project Adam and Eve. Adam was to colonize the Moon, Eve was to colonize Mars.
William, you have a few moments here. What would you like to leave listeners with?
Well, I'd like to tell them where they can write to me if they would like a packet of information. Send a self-addressed, stamped, number 10, or the business-size envelope to William Cooper, Post Office Box 1420, Sholo, spelled SHOWLOW, Arizona, 85901. That's P.O. Box 1420, Sholo, Arizona, 85901. If you'll send a self-addressed stamped business size or number 10 envelope, we'll send you a packet of information. And basically the best advice that I can give you is the world is in a state of change. The change will be so radical and so complete if it progresses the way it has been planned, as to make everything completely unrecognizable to anybody who lived just as little time ago as 10 years. If you're interested in where we're going, and if you want to help us make sure that what's coming about is going to be good for us and not bad for us, I would suggest that you get off of your lazy butts. That applies to most people, not all, and start a sincere search for the truth. The truth is elusive at best, but we must find it. We must act from a point of truth, not from a point of deception, and we must, as a whole people, help direct whatever change is coming so that we don't end up as slaves in this new world order.
William Cooper was my guest. Behold the Pale Horse, 500 pages. It's available in your bookstores. Once again, if you'd like to write to him, self-addressed stamped envelope to Post Office Box 1420, Sholo, Arizona, 85901. William, thank you so much for being a guest on Timeless Voyager Radio.
Thank you for inviting me.
All right. We'll talk to you later. Thank you. All right. What a great show, ladies and gentlemen. I hope that you enjoyed it today. Timeless Voyager Radio.